Okay, let's see. Where are we? I think there's sound. Hopefully, there's a few people out there. Give me a thumbs up or something in the chat if you guys don't mind, just to make sure. I'm playing around with my headset, so I just want to double check. Volume here. There we go. Anything? Anybody? Maybe. There's a hi from St. Louis, Keith. Hello, Keith. What else we got? Who else is out there? Check in. Let me know where you guys are checking in from. If you guys can pop something to the comments. Excellent. I'm glad. Kalamazoo. There we go. Not that I've ever been to Kalamazoo, but welcome, Kalamazoo. Anybody else? 13 people, I think, for our first live stream of 2026. Let's see, somebody checking in from Japan. So good morning to Japan. Not quite sure exactly what time it is there, but it's early, I'm assuming. That's coffee. If nothing else, green tea, I don't know. That depends what you drink, I guess. Tornado, West Virginia. That Tornado is the name of the town? Like, we've got South Australia checking in from Adelaide. There we go. Shalom to all. That's welcome, everybody. That's okay. Tornado, what? New Zealand. I think I'm finally doing a live stream at such a time that we can get a couple of people from literally the other side of the world kind of checking in from Oceania. I've gotten not criticism, but like, sort of people pointing, like, it's like I always do these like, on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon, my time in Ontario, and people, it's on literally the other side of the world in Oceania that aren't able to participate because they're asleep. But checking in from the Ottawa Valley, very good. That's my once upon a time my stomping grounds, and checking in from Romania, from Bucharest or Timișoara, perhaps. Okay, nothing particularly planned, but I've been wanting to do like a live stream for a little bit, and just life. You guys know life always gets in the way. Things come up. It's what happens. Um, I like doing these. It's a nice way to sort of reach out and touch base and have a little chat with people and sort of see where your interests are. Check in, see how we're doing. You guys can ask questions in the chat. Please do ask questions in the chat. Oftentimes questions will be posted in the chat and I will start talking to something and the conversation will kind of roll on past me. I'll catch up to things. I'll try not to miss questions. I do reserve the right to answer questions or not answer questions because this is my live stream and that's host's privilege. So yeah. No, Andy, it's not. It's not that I find the name Tornado, West Virginia difficult to believe. It just seems like you're inviting trouble somehow. I don't know how many tornadoes. I don't know if West Virginia is that tornado country. I don't ever think of it that way, but possibly. That's got a blue nose. You're checking in, Steve. Welcome in. Yeah. So DC swamp country. There's something about major world capitals being built on swamps that always makes me laugh. Between St. Petersburg, Ottawa, Washington, that's just pick the worst possible places that you can build a capital, and that's where you choose to build it. But it makes it a terrible place to visit in the summer and in the winter. But yes, for the naming your small town explosion, Comrade ZX, I'd asked people to comment, just post where you're checking in from, because I like seeing where people are checking in from at the end of the day. Let's see. So, yeah, state of the channel right now. We've had a good couple of months. The last little bit, viewership is picking up, going strong. We've had some good topics in terms of sort of generating broad interest type thing. A little bit more. We've done a run of Soviet focused episodes, which always seem to get some attention, or if not Soviet, then Soviet adjacent type topics. Um, we're going to try. We've got a few more like in the hopper that are coming down over the next little bit that are going to be sort of in a similar line, um, playing around with sort of looking at some of the former republics and things like that. Um, because you guys, the audience, seems to respond well to it, but we also find it really interesting, sort of like avenues of research to pursue and sort of look into ourselves. We don't, I mean, for anybody who may not know this, we go into topic selection based on sort of things that we know maybe a little bit about, but things oftentimes it's very much like not things that we're experts on, but so much as things that we want to know are more about ourselves, and it gives us a chance to research and write and do a little bit more digging on and sort of hopefully present something that's new to us, that's something that's new to you guys as well. So let's look for a couple more episodes. I mean, we started our Soviet economics episode. Look for the continuation on that. That'll be a three-parter. Sort of, we've done our up to the 70s. We'll do an episode in the 70s, and then there'll be an 80s economics episode, which should be really interesting because some of the analytics that go into Soviet economics in the 80s definitely fly in the face of what a lot of people assume that it was all a complete disaster, blah, 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 like, it was rotten to the core, going to collapse, et cetera, et cetera. Economics didn't collapse the Soviet Union. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, that's sort of where we're at there. And there's a bunch of other sort of what I think are interesting topics that we're digging into um, in I'm going to call it the writer's room because that's grossly overstating how we work. But there's a couple of ideas that we're sort of banding around and tossing around um, to bring new stuff to you guys. So that's sort of where things are at there. Um, and if, as I said, if you guys have questions, do put them into the chat. I will try to sort of con on and give my best thoughts as possible. So, um, well, here's a question and a half. I wonder, given current events, if I might comment on the path from the Cold War to today and how I feel it informs where we are in terms of the Middle East. Um, it is really broad. It's also incredibly um, relevant. Everything, obviously, I mean, history builds on itself. Like, nothing happens in the present um, without having precursors that are coming out of the past. Obviously, the Cold War period was almost 50 years of history that was very much all encompassing globally. There's almost almost no situation in the present that isn't informed in at least some minor way by the Cold War. And certainly the situation in the Middle East is informed greatly by the Cold War. The situation in Iran 1979, where it's like the Islamic Revolution happens and like the Shah is overthrown and like replaced by the Islamic Revolution and the clerics, doesn't happen without the Cold War politics that happened with the overthrow and the replacement of Mossadegh in the early 50s, over the reason of oil interests by the British and the Americans, and the installation of the Pahlavi dynasty at that point. So I mean, it really is. There's this direct thread that happens, and of course, there's conversation, and I'm not going to speculate on what's going to happen in Iran because there's some bad options, there's some worse options, there's some even worse options, but there's not a lot of good options that are going to that, in my opinion, that are really going to come out there. It's going to play out. We're going to see it over the coming days, weeks, months, however long this is going to go on. But I am seeing, it's like people talking about the restoration of the Pahlavi dynasty once the inevitable overthrow of the government happens, and like it's not a forewritten thing. But you don't see, like, like you wouldn't have this conversation about the restoration of the Pahlavis without the Pahlavis having been installed in the first place and then being overthrown, all as a result of Cold War politics, in terms of the Americans and the Brits wanting to maintain oil interests, but also interests in the Middle East, in the Gulf region, to offset the Soviets and to make sure that the Soviets didn't get control of that much more oil right alongside the Gulf. So yeah, there's all kinds of like, and this is a really, this is, I mean, that's such a cursory, like, a couple of hundred words on the topic. I mean, there's books and books and books, none of which I've particularly read, on that specific topic. I'm not deeply read on Iranian politics and Iranian history. Like, I know what I know, and there's lots there that I'm not aware of. And I'll be the first one to admit that. I have absolutely no problems admitting what I don't know. Um, but certainly, I mean, there's a very deep trajectory that happens there that's coming through the Cold War, into the modern day. The situation in Iraq is the same thing, where it's that there's that informed, like, the overthrow of the dynasty, the Hashemite dynasty in Iraq, the support, the lack of support for Saddam, like the support for Saddam, pan-Arabism, all of these things, these all have deep Cold War ties, as the U.S. and the Soviet Union are trying to gain influence in different areas in the Middle East, and those events all sort of play off of each other from beyond 1990 and 1991 into the present day. So, um, that's the biggest, I mean, the biggest takeaway that I could probably give to that specifically, is that anything that's happening in the news in the present, especially in certain areas, but in almost every area, you can look back and sort of trace through where the Cold War events happened. That isn't to say that something that happened in the Cold War is the present is the direct result of that, but the result, like the events of the present day, are certainly informed by the past. Um, that's my way of sounding smart about that, I guess. So, um, yeah. Let's see. Moving along, there seems to be a lot of comments and questions going on here. For only 40 people, this is moving. Um, but yeah, that's thank you. Please keep posting questions, and it's like you're going to listen, or you're not going to listen to me talk as we go along here. So, um, yeah, that's oh, this is um, so be cool to see. Good evening, Netherlands. Um, cool to see content covering Africa and South America. We've done I'm not going to say a fair amount, but we've definitely like dipped our toes back into Latin American history over the last 6 to 8 months, and that's going to continue. I want to do a couple of revisits to some things that we've looked at, but sort of change the focus and the angle, sort of the analysis of it. But which we can then build on into some other things. And I'm not going to give away too much on that, because it's something that I was actually taking notes on this a little bit earlier tonight. But that's something to look forward to at that point. Africa as well. I really want to sort of get into the decolonial the that's the word, decolonization movement, especially as it relates to the Lusophone countries like Mozambique and like, Guinea-Bissau, and a couple of the Portuguese, Angola, because I think that's actually a relatively, there's my dog right there, dog paws. Um, the Lusophone decolonization process happens later. It's a much more violent set of events that took place than what, I'm not going to say than what a lot of people think, but certainly than what happened in many of the former British colonies, and even in the UK, or sorry, the French colonies. That isn't to say that there wasn't violence in a bunch of those. There absolutely was. Nigeria, Kenya. There's a whole bunch of other places that there's definitely violence. But the Portuguese decolonization process was incredibly violent, and it involved um, third-party actors getting involved directly on the ground, and by that I mean Cuba. Cuban combat troops being deployed directly to Angola, in support of communist rebels. It's really this like fascinating Cold War microcosm, and I definitely want to get into that. Don't have a timeline on that, but look for that in coming episodes. Make sure you press the bell button, and it's like we'll see what terrible things we can do to the bell button for that episode. So, um, that's sorry, RoboCop comment. I have no idea what this is necessarily relating to, other than perhaps just Detroit and RoboCop. For anybody who is a bit of a gamer at all, the RoboCop game that was out last year, the year before, and might still be on Game Pass. Um, if you can get it, like, it's really fun. It's like this goofy, like it's very true to like the spirit of like the RoboCop thing, but it's also super goofy because it's got him. You play as RoboCop, and you've got to go around and get like a birthday card signed by everyone at the police station. It's just a bunch of stuff when you're not blowing away bad guys. Um, for anybody who hasn't seen the RoboCop movie, like the original one from maybe the late '80s with Peter Weller, check it out. It's a great dystopian movie. Definitely dystopian and very of its time, but definitely worth checking out. So, but also the video game, lots of fun. So, um, let's bear with me for 1 second here, guys. Um, well, that's interesting. Um, yes, I do do I do hee. I'm a child. Everybody's 12, as they say. I do occasionally do live streams, a couple a year kind of thing is really how often I get a chance to do them. I'd like to do them more, but I would feel like I always feel like I'm going to be pressing my luck to get people to come and watch. Um, but so your mom's from Donetsk. Uh, Interesting, the question here, like asking like what the Soviet view is on the withering away of the state, which definitely a Marxist like idea that was going to happen. That it's like as like communism, like as true communism approached, then the state would no longer be necessary and it would wither away. Um, Sort of definitely the Coles notes on that. Um, it's an interesting question. I've never considered like sort of looking at that particular angle. I sort of have my gut impression, and there's definitely a bit of gut there, a little less than there was before, which is I'm happy about. But my gut impression about the withering away of the state, the Soviet view, is that a lot of people pretty much knew that it was bullshit. That wasn't realistic. It wasn't going to happen in reality, but it was a nice ideal to think about. I mean, communism. That's really in a nutshell, in a lot of ways. Um, but that would be interesting to sort of like to look at that. I mean, it's definitely an interesting concept. I don't know if we'd be able to build an episode around that. Coming up with coming up with material to be able to put a compelling episode that people are going to watch can be challenging sometimes to because it depends on how much has been written about it, et cetera, et cetera. But um, yeah, that's let's see. Um, apparently, it's video game evening. Am I a Metal Gear fan? I have never played a Metal Gear game in my life, and every time I mention this, people kind of look at me like it's like, oh, like it's like you must not know anything about games. It's just a series that has completely passed me by. I keep saying that I'm going to go back, or I keep thinking like, you know what? Oh, I'm going to go back and I should actually try one of these. And then I sit down and I play 6 games of Civilization, or I do something like I fall back into that pattern, or if I am playing something new, I have one game that I play for 6 months because that's how much gaming time I get. So going back and finding old series like that can be quite challenging, just due to time limitations and restraints in my life. But to answer the question, I have never played a Metal Gear game. I know I should. Let's see. Eelmaster, thank you for binging those individual Soviet Republic videos. If you could do that about 6 or 7 more times from different IP addresses, that would be fantastic. Get all your friends, family, enemies, co-workers, everybody, if they can get them to do the exact same thing, that would be much appreciated. Moldova and Kyrgyzstan, stay tuned. Moldova is a incredibly weird and confusing topic for me. I understand that lots of people are quite familiar with how the creation of Moldova and how it exists as its own state, and Transnistria and all those things, and how they fit into it. Enlightening for me because it's not something that I've been familiar with. So as we've been looking at that, definitely something for people to keep on the radar. So thank you. Let's see. Yeah, lots of people talking about Uh, this, you know what? This is the type of deep analysis that we're here for. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Yes, it is. Um, Case closed. It is absolutely a sandwich. There's absolutely nothing that says that a sandwich has to be, bread on top, bread on the bottom, stuff in the middle. It's just bread on the side, stuff in the middle. Um, yeah, that's hot dog. Absolutely a sandwich. Do you dip your hot dog in water and then eat it? If so, you're disgusting. So, um, if I recall correct, question, any chance that we'll be covering the Brabant murders, the Brabant killers in 1980s in Belgium? If my memory serves me correctly, that is usually linked to a lot of the conspiracy around Gladio operators and stay behind operations, where weapons caches were used on some kill sprees. And I think there was incidents that happened. So I think the Brabant murders in Belgium, and as well in Italy. We haven't we have a 5-part series on early Gladio, which is probably about 2 episodes too much. But certainly, if you go back into the back catalog, there's a bunch of Gladio episodes. We took it up to sort of the creation and how that worked in a bunch of different countries, but we didn't actually take it through to the other side, into the conspiracy side of things. It's always been something that's been in the back of our head to come back to. So yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that we will come back to that, whether it's standalone on the Brabant killers or whether it's going to be looking at sort of a wider right wing, because that's the supposition is that it was right wing operatives that were conducted using the Gladio caches. Um, we're gonna whether how we frame it is the question, but we'd like to come back to that. Yes. So um, yeah, let's take a look here. Interesting question here. World War II created and informed the Cold War. Absolutely. I mean, that's how exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of the stream. It's exactly how history works. Like it's sort of this incremental building process and things. How did the events of World War One inform into the Cold War? I mean, the Sykes-Picot in the Middle East was absolutely the result of World War One. That feeds directly into the Cold War. I mean, the Russian Revolution and the creation of the Soviet Union. Um, I mean, believe it or not, absolutely cycles and like creates and built into the Cold War. So there's definitely things that happen within like the First World War and within that sort of that immediate time period, whether you want to end at a hard date of 1918 or sort of carry on into 1919 with the Western intervention in the Russian Civil War. Um, there's a bunch of things that happen there that certainly directly inform into a post World War II area. Those are the two that I've never been asked this question before, John. So forgive that I only have two possibilities, but I would like to think that they're both pretty big honking possibilities there in like the creation of the Soviet Union, and in Sykes-Picot in terms of redrawing the Middle Eastern map, and what a mess that actually is. And it's not just a mess in 2026, it's a mess in every single year since I'm not going to say since the beginning of time, because that is a gross overstatement, but certainly for many decades, that has been a big, giant mess. And a lot of that does stem from the way that the maps and everything were drawn after as a result of Sykes-Picot. Um, yeah. And I know there's somebody saying that they didn't want to talk about current politics, and it's going to come up in this because the events of the present, as I said, are part of the events of the past, and it's being able to draw lines to explain what's happening today and see where they come from. And I think that's actually really valuable and really important. Knowing our history, our shared history, our collective history, knowing the history of a region is really important for understanding A, why something is happening, and B, why something is happening and it might be bullshit. So um, sometimes people lie. People use history to lie, or they just lie about history. And knowing that stuff is really important to be able to draw that line into the present day. So my apologies that present day stuff may be coming up, but it's relevant and it's important, especially right now at the beginning of March of 2026. Um, yeah, moving on to um, some other questions I think about video games. Um, well, that would be interesting. That's so. So the question: would we do videos on specific socialist artists from the olden days? That makes me feel super old, by the way. But Diego Rivera and Dali and like I'm assuming like Frida Kahlo and a bunch of others like Picasso. Like you could factor in a whole bunch of different um, people, like different artists and whatnot into that. I like doing episodes like that where we sort of like it's the Shostakovich episode. And I've for anybody who has tuned in the last couple of these, like I keep going on about the Shostakovich episode because I really really love that Shostakovich episode. The problem is like as much as I love doing them, sometimes you guys don't, and people don't watch beyond sort of the 46 of you who are in the room right now. Um, I like doing them because I think they actually reveal an awful lot. But we do have to sort of balance what our viewers what the viewership numbers are like. We try to as much as possible, so we don't get punished by YouTube. Channels with dropping viewership get fewer promotions from YouTube, and it's this downward cycle. Whereas if you can pick up an upward cycle, so it's sort of balancing these subjects that we find interesting that we want to do with viewership. I think that'd be absolutely fascinating to do something like that. I can't. I'm gonna. We're gonna take note of it. Whether something gets produced directly on that, or whether we can work that into something else, that may be the way we aim to go with it. But I think that's a. I think that's a great idea because art really is. Sounds cliche to say it, but it's a window into seeing how things sort of. It's a window into a time frame. That's probably the words I want to use. If you want to understand sort of like an aspect of society, looking at the art that that society is producing is a really interesting way of sort of drawing attention to what people find important, what people are drawn to, what the art is saying, who it's speaking to, like all of those different things. So yeah, that's I really, for anybody who hasn't watched that Shostakovich episode, I implore you, please go watch it, please, and come and sing our praises because we did such a great job with it. That being said, um, yeah. Uh, oh, that's very funny that you bring this up. Pasadena 97. Curious if there's going to be any videos on Maoist movements that are still ongoing, as well as Shining Path. Uh, I was just talking about this with some of our creators, our writers, researchers with the team. Um, I really want to get into sort of like there's these Naxalite movements in India, like Shining Path in Peru. Some of them are still in existence, some of them are wrapped up, but this whole Maoist conflict between like you've got Marxist Leninist groups and then you've got Maoist groups, and they hate each other just as much as they hate the capitalist running dogs that they're trying to overthrow. Like it's this amazing sort of stories that get told. Um, I don't. It's not going to be in the next couple of weeks, kind of thing, but like it's definitely something like that's on the list because that kind of stuff really is interesting, and it does say a lot about how the Cold War was being fought, in terms of sort of the monolithic communism, which has never been monolithic communism, and how that actually played out in the real world. So yeah, that's um, and it's funny that you mentioned Shining Path because I've had Shining Path come across. I've crossed paths with Shining Path about 6 or 7 times in just the last week. I think that's probably a sign. So yeah. Um, let's see. Uh, Apparently someone's not a fan of Pamela Anderson. That's da-da. Sorry, hang on here. Um, all the videos in the SSR republics and our videos on some of the Warsaw Pact countries. I am uh, Keith Doran. You are an absolute trooper to go back to some of those early videos, which would have been the Warsaw Pact countries. Those would have been like sort of in the first 6 months, probably, of the channel. I waved my arms around a lot. I was engaged. The studio was dark. Still a real studio, which was great. Um, but you're a trooper to go back to those. Sound wasn't as good. Like I think we've gotten better as we've gone along. I would we're going to be doing so the direct question is like, we covered the growth of communism in some NATO countries like France. We're going to be doing it, but not exactly in that specified format. There'll be a couple of things that we want to look at that are only properly informed by explaining the growth of communism in some places like France. So stay tuned for that. That's sort of like we've got something in the works for that. We probably should be doing something on like the years of lead in Italy as well, because that's an equally fascinating thing. Although that one's daunting because Italian pronunciation um, is a that's not my forte, and my pronunciation at the best of times is not great, as the comment section will constantly point out. So, um, let's see. Oh, that's yeah. We should do. Sorry, I just lost where the question is. Um, There we go. Cold War themed movies, such as spy thrillers, nuclear weapons conflicts, critical perspectives. Those can be really difficult for us to do. We can do them. The challenge is that lots of, and again, this is coming because it's a visual medium. When we start talking about movies on a YouTube channel, it's a visual medium. People want to see clips from the movies. That's where we start running into copyright stuff, because there's fair such a thing as fair use, but YouTube is a big believer in striking first, and it's like you can explain yourself after. They're big believers in that, and we'd prefer not to be running into copyright issues because that can actually get the channel shut down. So those can actually be really difficult to balance, talking about what really is an important aspect of the Cold War. I mean, that's Cold War movies that's art. It's just a different art form from Frida Kahlo. Um, but we run into this visual challenge of copyright stuff. Um, so finding a way around that it's tricky. It's fortunately I have producers that are really good at stuff like that. But it's certainly, we are playing with that idea, but like finding out a way to actually practically do that is it could be challenging. So just if anybody's wondering why I haven't gone on a 3-hour diatribe about the Hunt for Red October, War Games, two of my favorite Cold War movies, by the way, that's the reason, is because it's like no one wants. I shouldn't say nobody wants to see me like reenacting scenes, but most of you don't want to see me reenacting scenes on my own. Like that's just not. We're professionals. Um, let's see. Could I imagine taking today's world leaders back into the Cold War? If leaders could act more serious and professional. I think it's very difficult to. I mean, I would like to think that we all know exactly, specifically who you're talking about. Is there a glut of unprofessionalism in politics in the present day? Yes, there is. Was there unprofessionalism in politics in the old days? Yes, absolutely there was. Politics is very much a victim of the 24-hour news cycle. It's a victim of people always having a phone with them to be able to record everything. There's not a single moment of our lives in the present that isn't at risk of being recorded. That's really the reality, more so in some countries than others. But um, I and where I'm going with that is, I think, like, it's like, did politicians in the old days do stupid things and say stupid things, do stupid things, act dumb? Yeah, 100%. It just may not have been reported quite as deeply. Um, is there an issue with, it's like people being deliberately dumb and stupid in the present? Yeah, I think there very much is, because it grabs headlines and it does a whole bunch of things, in terms of as a result of news cycle and sort of like those aspects. Um, but I mean, yeah, that's all I'm going to say to that. And anybody can read into that whatever they want. So, um, yeah, that's w- thank you. I mean, it's to be fair, like it's we've been trying to build academic perspective into more episodes as we go along. We've got a couple of I've got a couple of regular writers and researchers, who are, um, either have just successfully defended their PhDs or are going into PhD programs. Um, I I was in grad school. We all have, it's like grad degrees, of some sort. So academics, sort of like we've been leaning into that a little bit. We've done some long form interviews, with some Cold War academics. I think they're tucked away in the specials playlist. Um, which I mean, I like doing them because I like this conversational format, like, where you get to sort of pick somebody's brain and you have a conversation and discussion about things. They don't get a lot of viewership. Like, lots of people aren't necessarily that interested in hearing what a PhD has to say about something. Um, but which, okay, fine. I mean, it's, those episodes don't do as well in terms of our numbers, and again, coming back to the YouTube algorithm, we get punished for that. So yeah, but they're there, if the opportunity presents. Sure. I mean, there's always there's an ongoing discussion about setting up a secondary channel that I just get to do my own weird little thing. We cross promoted on the Cold War, and that would probably involve more things like that. But yeah, who knows? Like, that that's where that's where that resides at the moment. So, um, let's see. Um, Soul Sister, who I'm assuming is writing in from Korea. I can bring up whatever I want. Yes. And the chat can and will stay civil, because if I see people, fucking around, this isn't for kids. So if I see people fucking around, the old ban hammer comes out. So please stay civil. We're all in here to, just to chat and have a conversation and be good to one another. So yes, absolutely. The chat will stay civil. So, um, let's see. This is a what if question. It's a rather this is an interesting this is a regular debate at the like a pub debate, to be honest. If the coup against Gorbachev, that's the August coup in 1991, didn't happen and the new Union Treaty actually got put into effect, do I think some form of the Soviet Union would still be around today? I think it's entire. No, I don't. I think the Soviet Union was doomed at that point. Like the coffin, like the nail in the coffin was absolutely the August coup. But I mean, the Soviet Union was absolutely fractured at that point. So I don't think that the Soviet Union would have survived. Would it have been pulled apart exactly the way that it did? Probably not. I think it would have been a far more orderly over time type of progression. The Baltics were going to be out anyways. I mean, if you look at the timeline, like, I can't think of the number, but a bunch of the republics had all voted for independence. What independence exactly meant, um, they'd all voted like yes for independence from the center, even before the coup had happened. The coup just sort of hastened everything, and everybody just said like, yeah, okay, fuck you guys, we're out. And then, by Belavezha was signed like the beginning of December, and then by 26th of December it was done. Like, the Soviet flag comes down, the Russian tricolor goes up, and it's like, hey, look, the Cold War is over. Um, I think the Soviet Union was doomed earlier than that. Nationalism was going to rip it apart anyways. But I think it would have been over a longer, more orderly period of time, with certain exceptions. I mean, as I said, the Baltics had like yeeted themselves out anyways. Like they were out. But you would have seen, like, I think Turkmenistan would have stuck around for a bit for longer. Um, Tajikistan, like there's a couple of those republics that would have probably a lot more slowly pulled themselves away from the center. They were going to go, but they would have gone more slowly. Now, as I said, this is a pub conversation. Like this is genuinely something that, like, it's like nerds like myself and a couple of other people that will sit and have beers and talk about this. And there's lots of people that say, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, if there would have been a rump Soviet Union that would have consisted of like three republics that would have, carried on, and it would still be the Soviet Union. It would just have been like this, like, reduced in size Soviet Union. Like, who knows? It's the counterfactual history is interesting to have this conversation over a couple of beers. But I would be cautious to put too much investment into thinking that one through, because there's so many different factors at play, and there's chance like that, like the fact that that mystery factor of chance, that you never know what's going to happen. The events happened as they did, and that's what we have to work with. Yeah, that's that. Hopefully, that sort of, gives a reasonable answer to that question. Because but it's a fun question to sit and have a couple of drinks over, and have that discussion with other people who are familiar with sort of like the players and the line of events that were happening. So, um, definitely video game night. Have I played HOI Hearts of Iron 4? Um, no, I have not. I am not a Paradox game player. Um, those games are way too complicated for my simple old man brain. There are menus in menus in menus, and I can't do that. That's not. I am almost 50 years old. I have enough brain power to sort of look after about three things in my life, and Paradox games ain't one of them. So, um, they look super entertaining, and I get where the appeal is, because I used to play, sort of like the granddaddy of those games once upon a time, but nothing like Civilization is about sort of my where I cap out in terms of that type of game, and that's nothing like a typical Paradox game. So, um, yeah, let's take a look here. Just moving down, some people asking about Israel. I'm in the interests of everybody, I am going to avoid talking about Israel. Let's see. A series on the current leaders in the world today whose policies and worldviews are stuck in the Cold War, like the 1980s. I No, we've never talked about doing that. Like that's doing probably too much present day prognostication, and trying to doing an episode on that would be difficult, um, and a little bit of maybe wish fulfillment in some ways. Um, every single current leader, like, on the planet, is informed by the events of the Cold War. To sort of try to shoehorn, like, it's like, oh well, this person is Margaret Thatcher, this person is, they're acting exactly like, somebody would have done in the 1980s. It's Again, that's possibly a pub conversation. That's a podcast conversation, like, three, like, get another three, like, dude bros sitting around on a podcast having that discussion. Um, I don't know three dude bros to be able to do that with, so yeah, but I I I understand, like, I understand the question, because I think there's definitely some parallels in terms of what you see in terms of some thinking that seems very um, Cold War minded. But I'm not sure that I want to use my time to do that, just because I don't think that I would get much benefit from that. So, Um, yeah, that's um, most interesting, fascinating Cold War dictator. That's a question. That is a question. That's a question and a half. Thomas Sankara is really interesting. I don't know if dictator is the right word, but Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, um, largely because of not what he did when he was alive, but he was murdered within such a short time of taking power. Um, there was so much there's been so much mythos that's been built up around him in terms of, it's like he was what he was going to be able to do and what he promised, et cetera, et cetera. And it's sort of that curse of 27 where, like, it's like you die. That he died without being able to fulfill. He died without being able to too young to be able to fail. um Kennedy, the same. The myth around Kennedy is the same kind of thing. um yeah, like it's interesting. Like, I think that Thomas Sankara is a really interesting figure. um the whole North Korea thing is fascinating, like the creation of Juche, and, like, it's like Kim Il Sung, no, Kim. And there's too many Kims at this point. There's only three of them, but Kim Jong Un, Kim Il Sung. Somebody will tell me. North Korea is really interesting too. Like, I think, but that's just sort of like this weird, batshit crazy sort of like version of, like, the weird alternate. Like, it's the expanded universe, like on drugs kind of thing. Interesting guy. Um, yeah, that's moving along. Let's see. Uh, oh, that's actually this is good. And I've talked about this, and I've talked about this process before, but there may be new people, so this is actually really interesting. How do we develop a topic to getting it into the can and then um, out to YouTube? So genuinely, there's like a group chat. Like, no, we sit and we have these conversations in a group chat, about sort of things that we're interested in, things that sort of, like, it's like, hey, like, I was reading about this. Like, what about, a topic on this, et cetera, et cetera. And if something sort of, and there's like constantly like ideas being tossed out. And if something's interesting, we sort of, like, the group of us will workshop it a little bit, sort of come up with, is there explore it a little bit, figure out if there's enough to be able to, like, actually do a proper episode on it. Like, we've got to be able to have research material, because this is we actually do use research material. It's not just a vibes based channel. Um, and we sort of come up with what, like, sort of what's the angle, like, what kind of angle do we want on the story? Because, I mean, there's no universal telling of a story. Carr will tell you that. For anybody who doesn't know who that is, please go look up who Carr is, and go read what is history. But sort of come up with what the angle is, what's the story that we want to tell, and then someone will volunteer to do the research and the writing on that script. And they put together, like, the first draft of that script, comes back to me. We review it, we go through it, changes if necessary. If no changes, I go through it and do, like, editing on it. And the editing a lot of time is for voice. It may be for clarification, extra content, take some things out, basic editing stuff. But voice is important because I'm the one who's presenting it. Um, and then I get together with our producers, uh, usually about once every 4 weeks or so. And we've got a studio, like an actual studio that's set up. It is green screen. You guys might not believe that. Most of you believe that. It's a green screen. We do the filming, usually 4 or 5 episodes in a sitting, um, which is exhausting by the fifth one for me. And then it goes to, like, this storyboard, like, the episodes get storyboarded, the actual script type stuff, gets storyboarded, goes to production to add, to find, B-roll. And then it goes through a review process to make sure that, the sound seems pretty, like, pretty well aligned, to make sure that the footage looks good, that there's not me repeating this, like, mispronouncing the same thing 6 times over because we missed, like, cutting something in the right spot, because I take a lot of takes for some things. And then it goes through final review, and then, on a Saturday or Sunday, when we're ready, I hit publish and it goes out to you guys. So that's that whole process um, can take, it's like 30, 40 hours of work per episode. There's a ton of work between a bunch of different people that goes through for each episode, like a 20-minute episode. So yeah, like that's sort of the basic process that we follow, and that's pretty consistent over the last 7 years, because the channel is actually celebrating 7 years of publishing videos, which I really can't quite believe, but here we are. So um, no, that's, are we covering like on the channel? Are we covering the topic of Iran, or do you mean like? Well, if you mean on the channel, no, we weren't going to be covering like, any of this, like Operation Furry or whatever, Urgent Furry or whatever he's calling it. We're not covering any of that on the channel. Am I talking about it tonight? You can ask me questions. I know probably as much as you guys do, probably less in a lot of cases. It's an unfolding story. It's like 4 or 5 days old. It's I'm not sure what I can. You can ask questions. I reserve the right to refuse to answer based on what I'm A, comfortable answering, and B, what I have knowledge to be able to answer in the first place. So um, the B Night with a financial contribution. Thank you very much. Yes, 2026. What a year! Yeah, what a year. It's been a hell of a year already, and it's only the beginning of March. But thank you very much. That is the financial contribution is incredibly appreciated. Thank you so much for that. Financial contribution, this. I mean, we all do this because we love doing this. Like it's a joy and a pleasure to do it. There's we have financial obligations that we all have to meet, and donations and viewership and all the sponsors and all those things all go towards meeting that. But thank you very much. I know that everyone's hard-earned dollars are incredibly hard-earned, and anything that you're willing to give up really does mean the absolute world to me. So thank you very much. Um, let's see, moving along. Um, Patrick with the question: Do still images of movies encounter the same copyright issues as video? They can, and it really depends on sort of where YouTube is with the algorithm. Um, People also don't want to look. I mean, coming back to like, because I remember what I was talking about. People don't want to look at a still frame from a movie for 3 minutes while I talk about something. People want to see, like, would people do it, like pay attention to it? Probably, but I sort of feel shitty about it, and then we get some shitty comments, and it just makes me feel bad. It's just the whole thing. YouTube can also be quite aggressive, as I said, in terms of its copyright algorithms, and we just prefer not to take that chance. So um, we will find ways around it. Um, I because I would like to do that, and we've done like other like media stuff where we talk about that, but um, yeah, that's let's see. That have I ever been to the Berlin Wall, where Checkpoint Charlie used to be? I've never been to Berlin. Um, I've been to, the only place in Germany I've ever been is Munich, but I have never been to Berlin. I would absolutely love to go to Berlin, especially if it's a transit point on my way to Poland, because I really want to go to Poland. But yeah, that's long story short. I've never been to Berlin, so no, that's an easy answer to that question. I would absolutely love to go to Berlin. I'd love to go back. I haven't been to Europe in a number of years, and I would really like to be able to go back. But there's home stuff going on that prevents me from being able to travel too much. But hopefully at some point. Um, but I'd like to go back to a lot of places in Europe that I used to live in Hungary once upon a time many years ago, and I would love to go back to Hungary and see how much has changed and how much actually hasn't changed, because progress in that country is really difficult apparently. But yes, that's um, Yeah, please don't blow up the world. Like even when I'm here, gone, like that's just let's try not to blow up the world. That would be, I think that's probably the least that we can ask. So, um, video on Nixon and Watergate. I don't know how much we'll focus on Watergate necessarily because it's one of those things that people who are going to watch something about Watergate already know all about Watergate. I'm not going to add a whole lot to it. I think some extra context for a lot of people on Nixon though is actually really interesting. I was having this. Who was I? That was my oldest kid. I think the other day I was talking to about Nixon and their entire concept of Nixon. It was this, like he's this horrible human being and he's this right wing bigot, like all these things. And he's not wrong in terms of what they're saying about Nixon, but Nixon is also like this really like he's actually quite progressive in a lot of ways. The EPA was established by Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon had the enough of a majority that he could have rolled back all of like LBJ's like Great Society programs and like started stripping away rights from from non-whites. Like I mean the whole like civil rights movement, like all of that. He could have done that, and he chose not to. So Nixon is quite interesting. I think there's a lot of context, like and some deeper understanding that can and should be looked at in terms of that. So that's definitely something we'd like to do. Maybe not too well. We'd talk about Watergate, obviously, because you can't talk about Nixon without Watergate. But Nixon is this really fascinating character to me. So yeah. Let's see. Uh, Sorry, just going through a couple of bits here. My educational background. Yes, I actually did go to school for history many years ago. I have an undergraduate honors degree in history from a university here in Canada, and I have a postgraduate diploma um, from a university in the UK, studying specifically military history. Um, so that is my educational background. Um, Formal, not formal. I've always liked reading about history as it informs the present. Like that's very much what I've realized. Like that's very much what I like reading about. For a great many years, the Second World War was always a deep and abiding passion, especially the Pacific theater, like the PTO and CBI. Absolutely fascinating to me. Um, and then sort of this channel came along and I pitched the idea of the Cold War as a something to sort of explore further, and I've found that I find this topic actually much more fascinating. I think and I continue to think the Second World War is quite interesting, but I think the Cold War is just so much. There's so much more happening and so much more going on. It's just so insidious and nebulous and everything that yeah, I've definitely found my niche, my niche, depending how you want to pronounce that. So, um, yeah, that's. Um, you know what? Actually, John, you make an excellent point here. Leaders during the Cold War all went through the furnace of the Second World War together, and I'm gonna deviate slightly from you note that like forced them to grow up, and yeah, it absolutely did. Um, but I think because all of like this entire generation that went through of leaders that went through, and I think furnace is a really good word for it, went through like the absolute hell that was World War II, like the global madness. No one wanted to repeat that, and what they could do to avoid repeating that, especially knowing that there were nuclear weapons then involved, which would have made things just, I mean, infinitesimally worse. um, that all very much like it's like it tempers decision making. Like it's like there's rash decisions when a 10 megaton bomb or 15 10 megaton bombs are pointing at your city. I mean it it makes you stop and think when you've seen what the horrors of war look like. um, and I'm going to say we, and I'm going to be there's lots of people in this, like there's plenty of people in this chat that are coming from various parts of the world that likely have seen and experienced some degree of the misery and the horror of war. We in the West, speaking for myself, we don't have an experience of that. Like we don't have like that, like of being bombed and rocketed. The closest we get to that is Kiev at this point. And there's a lot of people that are trying to keep that as arm's length as possible. Um, yeah, I think that's a really important point, John. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you very much for that. I think that's really important to note that a big part of the Cold War, the reason for it staying cold in the broader sense, is that people didn't want to reenact World War II on speed. So um, yeah, let's let's see. Moving along, thank you for that. Moving along to other questions that I can possibly find and answer here. Just realized I think my wife is trying to call me. She's at work tonight, so it's part of the reason it's a good evening for me to do this. Um, let's see. Oh, so more academics in our videos. Do I plan on doing more historiography videos on prominent Cold War authors and arguments? That sounds like a literature review, Patrick, which I'm not sure that I'm ready to do that. I don't know how much interest there would be in people, knowing in me talking about, it's like, what does Otter and Avestat think about this versus, Louis Gaddis? Like, I, I I think there's value to it within the academic community and to people who are not just I shouldn't restrict that to just academics. People who are interested in historiography, there's value to it, but are 30,000 people going to sit and watch a video on historiography? I I would be I would be horrified if there were 30,000 people that want to sit and watch a video on historiography. Let's but I'll put a pin in it. I'll think about it. So, um I'd like to see me interview Stephen Kotkin. That would mean that I would have to read a bunch of things by Kotkin, of which I've got several, but that's thousands and thousands of pages to be able to prepare to have a conversation with Stephen Kotkin, which would actually be absolutely fascinating to do. Um, Again, I'm going to put a pin in that. So, um, yeah, let's see. This is the question that how you get canceled. What Balkan nation is my favorite? I don't have a favorite Balkan nation because they're all amazing and unique in their own way, and my love to the Balkans. Um, that's yeah, that's really how somebody throws a bomb at my house. I don't need that. I don't need that in my life. What are you trying to do to me? That's um, let's see. Have I watched For All Mankind? No, I haven't, and everyone keeps telling me that I need to. It's on. I don't have Apple TV, and I mean, I'm not one for necessarily like extolling the values like taking to the high seas to find copies of things. I'm quite positive that I would really enjoy the show, and I know the premise, everything, like, and I'm sure that I would really enjoy it. But there's extra levels for me to go and find episodes to watch. And honestly, like I work a corporate job during the day. I get home, I usually do like an hour, 2 hours of, it's like Cold War research writing, whatever that happens to look like. I have a family I like spending time with. I actually like my family. I want to spend time with them. I walk my dog. Where's my dog? There's my dog right there. Anyways, I like hanging out with him. Um, yeah, so in terms of watching TV, I don't really watch a lot of TV, I'm afraid. Um, yeah, so it's on the ever growing list of TV shows that I know I really should watch. Not sure I'm ever going to get there, but hopefully one of these days eventually. Um, yeah, that's let's see. Um, People talking. I'm way behind in terms of answering questions here because people are talking about my opinion on the survival of the Union. Let's see. I'm skipping forward a little bit. That's have I been to Vietnam? No, I've never been to Vietnam. I would absolutely love to go to Vietnam. It's on my list. I was just talking to my wife actually about that. That she doesn't eat seafood, so Vietnam's kind of can be. I think that's sort of a wild card trip. Um, I would love to go to Vietnam, but that I don't know how that's going to happen. I would love to. Have I been to Cuba? Yes, I've been to Cuba several times. Because I'm Canadian, um, it has been very accessible and very easy to get to Cuba for relatively cheap, honestly, vacations. This year has been since the Maduro thing in Venezuela. Cuba really has what my God, what a terrible thing that's happening to those people. It wasn't good before, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and magnified. With the effects of the embargo and like not being able to get any oil, which is literally shutting down the country. Cuba is not accessible to us at the moment. I have been in the past. I really, really enjoyed Cuba. Cuba's the people, the beaches are great, but the people are amazing. Um, really fantastic. Some of the best, great conversations with people in my basic Spanish, and their willingness to listen to a gringo, like like try to like massacre their language, and just wanting to get to know who they are and what they're about and everything. Really fantastic people in Cuba. So yes, I've been to, haven't been to one, have been to the other a couple of times. um, let's see. Let's, uh, Comrades Edix, has left, made a financial contribution. I know you're not listening to this at this point, but thank you very much for the financial, for the contribution. That is very much appreciated, immensely. Thank you for stopping in and spending a little bit of time with us. Much appreciated. Let's see. Um, Zachary asking a question: have we done videos on Cult of Stalin? Yeah, we did two actually. We've done one in the early days, which was a bit more sort of, probably like a bit more top level, a bit more cursory. And we did one not within the last year. We did one re-examining Cult of Personality built around Stalin. And that one, I think it was, the channel's evolved and developed in terms of how we approach things. And like as people were saying, there's a bit more of an academic bend to things. That one had a bit more of an academic look to it, but we went into a bit more into the analysis of the cult of Stalin. But yeah, we definitely have what I would like to think is a pretty good video on that within the last year, anyways. Um, Am I a Rush fan? Yes, I like Rush. I'm not like like a mega super fan or anything. I have seen them in concert once. I saw them on their last tour when they were at the ACC, which is it's the hockey rink here in Toronto. I was lucky enough to score some box seats, corporate largesse, to go see that, um, which was awesome. It was just like, that's the loudest show, one of the loudest shows that I've ever been. Not the loudest, but one of the loudest shows I've ever been to, and fantastic, very proud Canadian moment. And I don't have many of those, but a very proud Canadian moment to go see Rush. So, um, yeah, that's. Uh, let's see. Moving along. Um, some conversation about Yao Ming. I remember Yao Ming. Yeah, that guy's huge. If anybody ever tries to tell you that bullshit that, like, Asian people are all small, just say the words Yao Ming and like, oh my God, like that guy's enormous. Good ball player too. Am I a PhD? No, I'm not a PhD. I think I probably answered that after you had posted that question, Solcista. But no, I'm not a PhD. I have no intention of ever doing a PhD. Um, that's yeah. My wife would like me to be a PhD, but that's mostly because she would like to introduce me to her. She's a she's a nurse. She works with a lot of doctors, like MD doctors. She would like to be able to introduce me to people and say that this is my husband, the doctor. No, not that kind of doctor. So that's really the entirety of the closest I'm ever going to get to a PhD. Otherwise, I have absolutely zero intention of that. Um, yeah, let's see. Um, where are the exercises on Able Archer and the Vila incident? Well, they're not created yet, so they are up here. But for anybody who is interested but may not know what those are, Able Archer was a nuclear command and control exercise that was tacked on to the end of Reforger 83, and it is one of the moments that's touted as being the closest the world has come to nuclear annihilation. Except that one side had absolutely no idea that they were that close to nuclear annihilation. Paranoid Soviets and possibly somewhat oblivious Americans. And the Vila incident was the likely testing of an Israeli or South African nuclear weapon over the southern Indian Ocean in the early 80s. Yeah, early 80s. Um, that was likely an atomic, one of those countries joining the nuclear club, but it's never been confirmed. It's become known as the Vila incident. Um, yes, sorry, moving along. My thoughts on the Canada-U.S. hockey gold medal game. I don't watch the Olympics. I don't give a rat's ass about the Olympics. I haven't for a very long time, for a variety of reasons. I heard the game was like everything was left on the ice. It was, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that things would have been just fine had the, anyways, what happened afterwards. And like, there's, sore losers, sore winners, like, et cetera, et cetera. Politics is sports, sports is politics. I very firmly believe that. Do I have thoughts? Yeah, but I mean, you guys already know what those are. So, um, moving along. Um, let's see. Uh, Sorry, trying to read these. I'm trying to read questions as I go and not bore people by listening to me go, which is I'm not good at that. So, um, the what is the dog's name? The dog's name is well, I call him Grover, Grover. My wife calls him Rover because that's the name that he came with from the rescue. I think Rover sounds just goofy, like it's just like it's just such a what a basic name for a dog. So I call him Grover. Everyone, most of the rest of the family call him Rover. Um, he's a dog and really can't tell the difference between with the G or without the G. Um, so yeah, that's his name is Grover for the purposes of this channel and the 43 people that are hopefully paying attention to me at this point. The dog's name is Grover, um, and we've had him for 4 years. 4 years, yeah, 4 years. So um, this is an interesting question. It's a little bit more. Am I still excited about the Cold War after doing it for so long? Yeah, I am actually. This is the amazing, like absolutely. Um, just because there's always something new, there's always a new facet, there's always a new aspect to the topic. There's a new like there's always something new coming out. There's tons of documents that are being declassified daily, like around the world, all kinds of different archives. And as that happens, more academics are able to get their hand on it and they're able to do their own analysis from different perspectives and lenses and angles. And all of that gets published. And like, it's like you get into conversations with people. It really is like, it's just this deepening love affair with the topic. Um, yeah, like it really is just like, I absolutely love it. So Will we see more on the topic of Yugoslavia? Yes, we are. We'll probably do one, maybe two episodes between sort of like the like market socialism, sort of like the role that Yugoslavia played during the Cold War itself, because it wasn't really ever Eastern Bloc, but it was never like it was, Bandung, like the third um, non-aligned movement, like that whole thing, where Yugoslavia sort of sets itself up in the middle. um, but then obviously, like the dissolution of Yugoslavia, which is like the death throes through the 80s and the rise of nationalism, and then finally the Balkan Wars. Um, and which I so vividly remember from like the early 90s, and just how awful that was. Um, yeah, like that's oh no, definitely going to be coming back to that. So give me 1 second here, guys. Oh, that's better. Um, let's see. Sorry, I'm laughing at this question because it's just so blunt. Is this World War III? I don't know. Let's hope not. That's really all I can say to that. Let's not. Let's hope not. Let's just hope not. That's uh, James Baker. I'm assuming that this is possibly a different James Baker than former Secretary of State James Baker. But if it's the same James Baker, that's amazing. Um, Thank you for that compliment. We publish videos, and we do our research and our scripts based on sort of like the what we have access to and what we believe. Um, as much as some people try to convince you that history should be unbiased, history is biased. All history has bias. I will refer you back to E.H. Carr and What is History, which I mentioned earlier in the show. Um, Being honest to the sources and being honest to the material um, is the ultimate thing that we try to do. Um, and I don't expect everyone to agree with sort of the angle that we take, or exactly how we present things. But we hope that people agree that we make the best effort possible to be fair and even-handed in terms of what we do. So thank you for that. That's very much appreciated. Um, what is my day job? My day job, I work in a medical device for a medical device company. It's just a regular old corporate job that I've done in an industry that I've worked for a very long time, that treats me well and that I enjoy. And I feel I do something good in the world during the day, and then I come home and I hopefully do something good in the evenings. So it, yeah, that's clearly I'm being slightly like it's like hidden in terms of what I do. I'm not going to go tell you like the address of where I work is. Blah blah. Blah. Please understand that this is the public, and the public can be very weird sometimes. Um, but I have a what I feel to be quite a fulfilling day job, which is more than I think a lot of people can say. Um, and it's one that at a company with people that treat me well and with respect and all those things. So um, yeah, that's David is not a high school teacher. um, where am I in Canada? I'm in the GTA. I'm in the Toronto area. I've been living here for almost 25 years, I want to say, coming up on 25 years. I am originally from the Ottawa area, um, but I've been down here for quite a long time. I don't like Toronto. I like Toronto less and less every minute that I spend here. But this is where my job is, my kids and my wife and my family and all those things. 25 years. I just don't like the city. I would rather be somewhere else. I would rather be back in the Ottawa Valley. But yeah. Um, when and how did I become interested in the Cold War? So I'm born in the late 70s. I grew up a Cold War kid, like through the 80s. The TV was always on with the news. My parents always had newspapers. Um, in because of my dad's job, we moved around a lot, including places abroad. We would always have newspapers, even if they weren't in English. So there's constant exposure to the news, and it's like you watch the news in different languages, and whatever that happens to look like. Um, and the Cold War wasn't history at that point. The Cold War was just like the background of everyday life. So that's sort of baked in there. I used to play a lot of video games as a kid, like flight simulators and things like that. In the late '80s, when they came on discs and they had manuals, and those manuals had histories and explanations of what the scenarios like were supposed to be and blah blah. Blah. And a lot of that was Cold War stuff. It was microprose games like F-19 and Gunship and blah blah. Blah. And again, like that wasn't Cold War history at that point. That was just like that was events from the news. Um, but that sort of seeped in, and I loved that kind of stuff. And I, with my dad's job, we ended up in Hungary for 4 years, in like the early '90s, and we watched like communism be, sort of socialism be taken apart. Like we watched that in real time. Um, and then yeah, that stuck with me. And then ended up in Russia on and off, in Moscow, in the late '90s, and that's just sort of like adds fuel to that as well, because that's sort of the like, oh my god, like it's like I'm standing in the middle of Red Square, and that was fascinating into itself, and that's like sort of like fuels the Cold War stuff as well. And it's yeah, like that's there's always been an interest in the period. As I said before, the Second World War was always the passion prior, and then I started doing this channel and realized that what, this is my baby. This is my passion. So yeah. Um, we're getting conflicting messages. One saying it's the same James Baker, and somebody else saying that it's not the same James Baker. But I am going to trust the James Baker saying that it's not the same James Baker. And don't worry, James, I won't hold that against you. So thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Um, that's let's see. Um, sorry, guys. I'm my voice is dying here. I realize I've been talking for almost an hour and a half, which is a lot even for me. That's I have somebody jumping in defending like my dislike of Toronto. Um, so somebody had asked a little bit earlier, what's wrong with Toronto? Brian O'Rourke had asked, what's wrong with Toronto? It's a city that the infrastructure hasn't kept up with the population growth. Anywhere you go in the city, it's it's just a really it's a big city in that there's always something to do, there's always something going on, but you have to prepare for like giant chunks of time of your life to be able to get to whatever it is that you want to go to. And it's as I'm getting older and grumpier, it's just more of a hassle. um yeah, like it's not it's too much. It's too big for this guy that wants to sit in the quiet and not have to worry about think about traffic and parking and like all that nonsense. So I don't think that this is really radically different from the feelings of like people who live in any other big city in the world. This just happens to be the big city that I live in. So um, yeah, that's um, was the Challenger explosion a big deal in Canada too? I will come clean, Soul Sister. We all knew about it here, and I know that because people have told me that. I wasn't living in Canada at the time that the Challenger explosion happened. I was living in Colombia, in Bogota, and it was a really big deal there. That was on the news cycle, like on the news constantly. I saw that explosion. I came home from school, and there it was. Like it's like I can still see it. That bright blue sky with like it's like the splitting branching cloud coming. Like it's not the capsule coming. Like I vividly remember that. I was in grade 3. Um, it was a big deal. It was a really big deal. And I know it was a big deal here in Canada as well, because my wife has told me, like, we both have those recollect. We've had that conversation, like, where were you when? We have that recollection of exactly where we were when we saw it happen and we found out about it, and then talking about it afterwards, like with like your friends and with teachers and like all of those things. So Challenger was a big deal in the West. Like it was absolutely a big deal. It was that whole the invincibility of like the US being challenged like right there. Like it was that was such a big important mission with like Sally. No, I was going to say Sally Ride, but that's not the teacher. I can't think of her name right now. But yeah, like that's like that it was a big deal for sure. Um, would would it be better, Brian, if I just kept calling it Moskva? I can call it Moskva, but that's going to sound really weird as I speak English through the rest of it. Canadian pronunciation can be a very strange thing um, because it will change. The same word will change pronunciation three times in the same paragraph. It really depends. We are exposed to a ton of British media. We are exposed to a ton of American media, and we are exposed to a ton of our own Canadian media. We're also a really big country next to another really big country, where pronunciation changes on its own within all of these regions. So pronunciation is going to be very strange, and we do normally say it Moscow here, but I can say it Moskva, and I can spell it out that way if that makes people feel better. So, um, what Cold War countries have I been to? Every country I've ever been to has been a Cold War country, just after the fact, because the Cold War reached out everywhere. That's my gotcha comment. Um, but it's in a lot of ways, it's actually true. I mean, Hungary and Russia are probably the two most direct things I think in terms of what you mean. Um, in terms of countries I've lived in, I mean, I've been to Slovakia, I've been to Czech Republic, I've been to Finland. I mean, I'm probably missing a bunch of others in there, but been to Austria, like um, yeah, like is Hong Kong a Cold War country? Like it was a colony at the time that I was there, but I mean, there's lots of yeah, like I've been like South America, like I've been to a lot of places, but that's yeah. Anyway, that's um, let's see. I am going to be wrapping this up relatively soon, just because I'm definitely starting to lose my voice a little bit. Um, the Lenin Mausoleum on Red Square. I've never actually like I've been to Red Square a bunch of times when I was in Moscow. I've never actually been into the mausoleum. The lineup for it was always gigantic and huge, and I always sort of assumed like, oh well, I'll come back at some other point when it's not quite so bad, and then I'll go in and see his shrinking mummified corpse. And I just never did. And to be perfectly blunt, it's not something that I'm actually disappointed that I've never actually gone in to see. Um, Interesting to see it from the outside. Like there's definitely like there's a feeling of standing like on it's like Krasnaya Ploshad, and you've got St. Basil's at one end, you've got like the Natural History Museum on one side, the Kremlin on one side, GUM on the other, and it's that feeling that you've seen this on the news so many times. You've seen a Cessna land on it. For anybody who knows that reference, like there's so much like history and it's so alive, and you're standing in the middle of it and realizing that it's just a square. There's really nothing crazy about it except what you make of it. Um, and then Lenin's mausoleum is right there, and Spassky Vorota and like all these things. Um, there's a sense of history and a sense of feeling to it if you want it to be there. Like I was there with my parents, and my they hated it. Like like especially Red Square. They never had that sense of awe and wonder and that feeling that they're in contact with history. That could just be a me thing. That could just be like a history nerd thing. I don't know, but um, yeah, that's interesting. Just I thought of that as you mentioned um, Lenin's mausoleum. So since they took Stalin out of it, it really just sort of lost the flair. He's buried in the wall when you go out and around the side. That was really interesting because when I was there, I hadn't realized that he was actually buried in the wall. And you're sort of going along and reading like the names of like the people interred, and you suddenly realize that you're standing in front of Stalin's like it's like, oh my god, like it's like, look, one of the world's mass dictators and killers. So this is insane. Um, yeah, that's just kind of funny, but um, yeah. I think on that note, guys, I am going to start wrapping this. I apologize that someone is going to have to go back to class as a result of me losing my voice a bit. But can I read Cyrillic? Yeah, I can. I've taken a couple of years of Russian language. Not that you can ever tell when I start pronouncing anything, but I can, like, I'm familiar with the alphabet and I can read it. I've been actually taking Ukrainian lessons for the last little bit. Um, so yeah, like Cyrillic is, I can read that slowly a lot of the time, but I can't read Cyrillic. So don't always know what it means, but I can read it. But on that winning note, thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. I appreciate the support from everybody out there. As always, it's look after each other, stay safe, throw us a couple of bucks, if you're able to. Completely understand if you're not able to, but click on the, press subscribe, press the bell button. We do terrible things to it every week. And yeah, most importantly, look after each other. And on that note, have a good night, everybody.